time is 9:11 on September 2nd, 1998. We're going back on the record. This is the videotape deposition of Bill Gates.
Good morning, Mr. Gates. Do you understand that you're still under oath?
Yes.
Since the deposition session last Friday, have you talked to anyone other than your counsel about your deposition or about this case?
There were people who knew I'd been deposed who said, "Were you deposed? And are you done being deposed?" And I simply told them I had been deposed and that I thought I had one more day of being deposed.
Other than simply telling them that you had been deposed and you had one more day to be deposed, did you have any discussions at all with anyone other than your counsel, either about your deposition or any matters relating to your deposition or about this case since last Friday?
I think someone mentioned they'd read in the paper various things about the deposition.
Who was that?
I don't remember who. I was at an event where there were like 500 people, some of whom I wasn't introduced to, but I think some people came up and said they'd been read about it in the newspaper.
And one of the people that said that was somebody who you didn't know. Is that your testimony?
Well, I remember some people saying that. I don't recall exactly who said it.
What is this event that you talk about?
Oh, it's a get-together that Paul Allen had of a number of people.
You attended this get-together?
Yes.
When did this get-together take place?
Friday night through Monday morning. Although actually it started Friday morning, but I was there from Friday night to Sunday night.
I'd like you to tell me everything that you can recall that you said to anyone since last Friday afternoon about the deposition or this case or anything relating to this deposition or this case.
Other than my lawyers?
Other than your lawyers, yes, sir.
Did you include my wife in that?
Did you talk to your wife about this deposition?
Yes.
Did you talk to your wife about this case?
Well, I talked to her about the deposition, which relates to the case. I didn't talk to her about the case in any sense beyond talking about the deposition.
Was anyone else present when you did this?
No.
Let's leave your wife aside, too.
I can recall some people saying it must have been rough. And my saying, well, it's like depositions I've been in before. I think a lot of people came up and said they were rooting for us. A number of people asked if I was done with my deposition. Some people suggested that they were surprised I'd been able to make it, given that I'd been in a deposition. I explained that I had to come late because of the deposition. But that's all I can remember about anything about the deposition.
Or about the case, or anything related to the deposition or the case?
Other than my wife and my lawyers, yeah.
Yes. I asked you last week whether you were going to be a witness at the trial of this case, and you said you didn't know. Do you know now whether you're going to be a witness at the trial of this case?
I don't know. No, I don't. I don't know whether our side will make me a witness or whether your side will make me a witness.
Do you intend to be a witness at the trial of this case if we do not call you?
I don't know.
Have you spoken to anyone other than your counsel about whether or not you intend to be a witness at trial in this case?
I haven't spoken to anyone else about an intention to be a witness. I have told my wife that there's a time we're on vacation that may overlap this trial, and if either side does choose to call me, looking at what kind of disruption in our schedule that might cause.
Other than conversations that you have had with your wife or your counsel, have you had any conversations with anyone about the possibility of your being a witness at the trial of this case?
No.
Other than conversations that you have had with your counsel, have you had any conversations with anyone about the possibility of someone other than yourself being a witness at the trial of this case?
Yes.
With whom have you had those conversations?
I spoke to a MIT professor, Professor Detruzos, about his possibly being a witness in the case, an expert witness.
When did you do that?
A few weeks ago. I don't remember the date. I could go back and try and establish it, but it's more than 2 weeks ago.
Was that a conversation that you had in person or by telephone?
By telephone.
Were you asking him if he would be a witness? Is that what you were doing?
I was inquiring whether he'd be willing to be a witness, yes.
What did he say?
He wasn't sure when I talked to him, and he said he'd think about it.
Other than that one telephone conversation, have you had any conversations with anyone concerning the possibility that someone other than yourself might be a witness at the trial of this case?
Other than with my lawyers, no.
Other than with your lawyers? Have you made any efforts, or to your knowledge, has anyone at Microsoft, other than counsel, made any efforts to determine whether people would be willing to be trial witnesses in this case?
The only thing I know about along those lines is there was an economist who came out and met with me and some other Microsoft people, and that may have been in connection with whether or not that economist would be an expert witness in this trial
When did that happen?
a few weeks ago.
Do you know the economist's name?
Yeah, Dick Smallensy. I don't know how to spell it.
I don't either, but I know who you mean. Other than Professor Schmalensee, and that meeting that you had with him, and of course the telephone conversation with the MIT professor, have there been any other people that you're aware of that either you or other people at Microsoft have talked to about the possibility of being a witness?
No.
Insofar as you are aware, has anyone at Microsoft, other than your counsel, called up any companies with whom Microsoft does business to discuss the possibility of a representative of those companies being a witness in this case?
If so, I'm not aware of it.
Well, sir, the term browser is a term that is widely used within Microsoft, or at least was until this year. Correct, sir?
Objection.
We use the term browser, yes.
And you personally used the term browser, did you not, sir?
Yes, that term is used in quite a variety of ways.
Including by you, correct, sir?
Yes.
You've written emails about browsers, correct, sir?
I've written emails where the term browser was used. I wouldn't say it was necessarily an email about browsers.
Have you ever written an email that you consider to be about browsers, sir?
I'll bet there's email where the primary subject relates to browsers. I don't remember a specific piece of email.
And when you wrote emails using the term browsers, you believed that people would understand what you meant by browsers, correct, sir?
I'm sure there was enough context in the email that I felt I could communicate something of meaning.
And you've used the term browser in dealing with people outside of Microsoft, have you not, sir?
Yes, it's a term that I've used both internally and externally.
And there are a lot of people outside Microsoft that have written articles about browsers, correct, sir?
There have been articles about browsing and the technology people use for browsing and comparing how different companies do that, and they use the term browser.
Yes, the industry in Microsoft tracks what is referred to as browser market share, correct, sir?
No,
No? Does Microsoft track browser market share?
I've seen usage share,
You've seen usage share?
but not market share. Usually refers to something related to not to usage, and with browsers I've seen mostly usage. Now some people might refer to that as a market share, but it's not a market share.
What is a market share?
Well, when I think of a market share, I think of where you're comparing the revenue of one company to the revenue of another company.
The total revenue of a company?
No, the revenue related to one company's product to the revenue of another company's product.
And that's what you think of when you use the term market share? Is that your testimony?
Usually.
Are you aware of documents within Microsoft that describe browser share as the company's #1 goal?
No, I'm aware of documents within Paul Maritz's group that may have stated that.
Is Paul Maritz's group within Microsoft?
Yes, but he doesn't set the company-wide goals.
Mr. Maritz, you identified last week as being a group vice president, is that correct?
Several times.
And he is the group vice president with responsibility for Windows, is that correct?
That's among his responsibilities.
And included in his responsibilities was Internet Explorer, is that correct?
Our browsing technology was part of that group.
Was Internet Explorer part of that group?
Yes.
Now, did you ever tell Mr. Maritz that browser share was not the company's #1 goal?
No.
You knew Mr. Maritz was telling people that browser share was the company's #1 goal, did you not, sir?
I knew that Mr. Maritz was saying to people that a top goal and perhaps #1 goal for his group was browser usage share.
Now, you've put in the word usage share there. When Mr. Maritz was telling people that browser share was the #1 goal, was Mr. Maritz saying browser usage share or just browser share, sir?
You'd have to ask him. I think he meant usage share.
I'm not asking what he meant, excuse me, and perhaps my question was unclear. I'm asking what he said or wrote.
Object to the question.
Do you understand the question?
What writings are we talking about?
Well, let me ask you the question, Mr. Gates, since you're the witness. Are you aware of any time that Mr. Maritz wrote in an email or said or otherwise communicated to people that browser share was the #1 goal?
The #1 goal for what?
Just the #1 goal for the company. Let's start with that. Are you aware of any time when Mr. Maritz said that?
Said it was the #1 goal for the whole company?
I didn't say the whole company. I didn't put in the word whole, Mr. Gates. And I know that you're very precise in the way you use words, and so I want to be sure that the question and answer are meeting. The question is, are you aware of any instance in which Mr. Moritz, in words or in substance, communicated that browser share was the #1 goal for the company? And by the company, I mean Microsoft.
I don't remember any such case.
Are you aware of any instance in which Mr. Moritz communicated in words or in substance that browser share was the #1 goal for his group?
I think there was a point where he did that. I don't remember the document, but I think there was a point.
Do you know why Mr. Moritz came to the view that browser share was the #1 goal?
For his group?
Did he say for his group in the communications that you're
Well,
talking about?
It's not his position to set goals for the entire company. So when he says something that's a goal, it's certainly implied it's a goal for his group.
Interpreting what Mr. Moritz has communicated in light of that, do you know how Mr. Moritz came to the view that browser share was the #1 goal?
Well, I think he was aware of the increasing popularity of the internet and the growing usage of the internet, and felt that all the many innovations we were doing in Windows, that a particular focus had to be doing the best job on the internet and internet browsing features of the operating system, and seeing if we could innovate enough to make people prefer to use that technology from us.
Mr. Gates, isn't it the case that you told Mr. Moritz that browser share was a very important goal? And that's why he believed it.
I guess now we're delving into the inner workings of Paul Moritz's mind and how he comes to conclusions.
Well, let me try to ask you a question that won't require you to delve into anybody else's mind. Did you tell Mr. Moritz that browser share was a very important goal?
I know we talked about browser share being important.
I'm not asking you what he said to you. I'm not asking you what topic you talked about. I'm asking you whether you told Mr. Moritz that browser share was a very important goal.
I remember that we agreed that it was an important goal. I'm not sure which one of us reached that feeling before the other.
Have you communicated to people other than Mr. Moritz within Microsoft that browser share was a very important goal?
Well, you've used several times, the very, and I don't know if you're asking me specifically about sometime where I use the words very. Is that the question?
Let me begin with that question. Have you communicated to people within Microsoft other than Mr. Moritz that browser share was a very important goal, using those words?
I don't remember using those words.
Have you communicated the substance of that to people within Microsoft?
Help me understand. If you communicate to people that something is important, is the substance of that identical to communicating to them it's very important?
Would it be, in your view, Mr. Gates, if you were using those terms, would important be the same as very important?
Not identical.
What would be the difference?
The two varies.
And what significance in terms of substance would those two varies have?
A speaker's tendency towards hyperbole.
Now, other than your tendency, if you have one, to hyperbole, would there be anything different that you would be communicating to people if you were to say browser share is an important goal or browser share is a very, very important goal?
You'd have to look at the context to see.
As you sit here now, what you've told me is that you recall communicating that browser share was an important goal, but not a very, very important goal. And all I'm trying to do is find out whether you draw a distinction in terms of the substance of those communications.
And I said it would depend on the context.
Let me ask you to look at least one context, and that would be Exhibit 358 that we marked during your deposition last week and is in the stack of exhibits that you have in front of you. Did you write Exhibit 358, Mr. Gates, on or about January 5, 1996?
I don't remember doing so specifically, but it appears that I did.
And the first line of this is, quote, winning internet browser share is a very, very important goal for us. Do you see that?
I do.
Do you remember writing that, sir?
Not specifically.
Now, when you were referring there to internet browser share, what were the companies who were included in that?
There's no companies included in that.
Well, if you're winning browser share, that must mean that some other company is producing browsers and you're comparing your share of browsers with somebody else's share of browsers. Is that not so, sir?
Well, you asked me if there was any companies included in that. And now I'm very confused about what you're asking.
All right, sir, let me see if I can try to clarify it. You say here, quote, winning internet browser share is a very, very important goal for us, close quote. What companies were supplying browsers whose share you were talking about?
It doesn't appear that I'm talking about any other companies in that sentence.
Well, sir, is a market share something that is compiled only for one company? I understand if a company has a monopoly, that may be so, but in the usual situation where a company does not have a monopoly, a share ordinarily implies comparing how much of a product one company has with how much of a product another company has, correct?
Yes?
Now, when you were talking about internet browser share here, what companies were you talking about?
You seem to be suggesting that just because share involves comparison multiple companies, that when I wrote that sentence I was talking about other companies. It doesn't appear to me that I'm talking about other companies in that sentence. I mean, I've really read it very carefully, and I don't notice any other companies in there.
Oh, you mean you don't see any other company mentioned in this sentence? Is that what you're saying?
The sentence doesn't appear to directly or indirectly refer to any other companies.
when you refer to a internet browser share here, sir, what is the share of?
Browser usage?
Now, of course, you don't say browser usage here, do you, sir?
No, it says share.
Now, let's say that you meant browser usage, because that's what your testimony is. What browser usage were you talking about in terms of what your share of browser usage was? What browsers?
I'm not getting your question.
Okay.
Are you trying to ask what I was thinking when I wrote this sentence?
Let me begin with that. What were you thinking when you wrote this sentence? if
I
that's
don't
what you want?
remember specifically writing the sentence.
Does that mean you can't answer what you were thinking when you wrote the sentence?
That's correct.
Okay. All right, so since that question is that you